As Ferris Bueller said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. All right, so I wanted to talk about endings and, of course, beginnings today because this is graduation season. And I remember, for me, graduating high school was the weirdest experience I think I've ever had in my life.
Why is that?
For 12 years, well, 13 if you count kindergarten.
Kindergarten, sure.
There's a place that you're supposed to go every day.
Right.
Or every weekday at least. And you go there with all of the other kids from your geographical location. And you're all shepherded together, and you're broken up into arbitrary groups of 30 or so, especially in Southern California in the 80s and 90s.
Sure.
And you just kind of spend all day, every day with this arbitrary group of people. And then you become so familiar with some of them that you are friends now.
Well, I think also, everything's planned out for you. So there's really almost no thought as far as that is concerned. You just show up and you're like, you do this, you do that, you sit here, and everything will be fine. And then you just kind of go along with it.
Right. And it's almost a conveyor belt that you can just stick with, and you just keep going. And eventually, 12 years later, they spit you out at the end and they say, you've graduated.
And then what?
Exactly. I wasn't paying attention to what I wanted to do next or opportunities. I figured, I'll go to college. Sure.
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of like this dead zone. And around this time, actually, they made a movie called Ghost World.
Not familiar.
I don't know how big this movie got, but at the time I was working at Blockbuster Video.
Sure.
And so
every movie had some kind of value.
I saw them all. But Ghost World, I think, was what it was called. And it was about these two girls that graduated high school, and then they just kind of fall off the planet. And that's what the Ghost World is, that they're just going through the motions, and they've got, their kind of entry-level jobs, and they don't really see anybody anymore, and they don't socialize the way that they used to. And there's not like everyone in school is invited to the party at the end of the semester or whatever. There's just...
So for you, was like graduation of high school, was that like the big crescendo and then drop off?
Kinda. That it was a big celebration of all the things that I had accomplished, and that's great, and that's cool, and like, hey, you got a high GPA, and now where are you going to go to college? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know. Probably just go to community college because I don't have any scholarships lined up, or like, for me, I had a whole weird situation because I moved in the middle of my junior year of high school, so I didn't have everything was crazy when it came to taking the SATs. SATs where I used to live, and then they took the ACT over here.
Right.
And then sophomore year, you're supposed to do the prep test, and then junior year, you take I don't even know all the specifics, but it was just weird. And I specifically remember to this day, chemistry class. My old high school chemistry class used the same book as the new school.
Wow.
You'd think that would be really cool and really helpful.
Right.
Except that where I moved to was 20 chapters ahead.
Really?
Yeah. I moved December, so I finished off the spring semester, started our fall semester, and then started spring semester at the new school. And they were using the same book, but they were so far ahead that I just never caught up.
Was it an advanced class or something of that nature?
No.
Huh. That's weird.
Just the way that it was structured here just kind of went differently. At any rate, I was this blew up my world so that I was not prepared for things like, standardized testing.
Sure.
So I was just like, you know what? It doesn't matter anyway. I don't have any money, and I don't have any scholarships, so I'm just not even going to bother applying to all these different 4-year schools. I'm just going to live at home and go to community college for 2 years, and then move on and transfer to a university at that point.
Yeah.
Honestly, it ended up working out pretty well for me. I graduated with very, very low student debt, which I know can be crippling for some people.
Yep.
But it saved me a lot of money, and it let me make the choice slowly about where I wanted to be next.
But you transitioned from your junior college to regular 4-year college at some point in time, right? Okay.
Yep. So I did my I don't even remember what they call it, the upper division credits, the 3rd, 4th year stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that I think that it's so helpful to have a plan, even if you don't end up sticking with the plan because you get 2 steps in and you realize you don't want to do that. That's fine. Pivot. Change your plan. But having a plan can soften the blow of the ending being so jarring.
For me, my high school graduation was a little bit different. I'd started working by my sophomore year, and I was working, I started off as a busboy at one place, and then the next summer I started working at a like a Caro's kind of restaurant, right? Those family restaurants.
Yeah.
And I worked. Caro's is actually the name. I say that. It's like Denny's. It's kind
Oh,
of
I've
like,
been to Caro's.
So
For the viewers at home.
they're not around anymore, as far as I know. But at the time, and I was working there during the summer, and I was working the graveyard shift, and so I already had a plan in mind because a good portion of my money was either me spending it on school for like clothing and books and stuff. When I went to high school, we had to pay for books. All right, so I had to pay for my books, pay for some class fees, and we had to pay for our locker and locks and all that stuff like that. So I paid for that every year since my sophomore year. And then some of my pay I would give to my mom because she was a single parent, and my stepfather was not giving the money he was supposed to be giving to for child support. And so things were tight for us. So I was always in this working mindset. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to finish high school, but I'm already going to be working that time frame. So the next step for me was, okay, graduate, cool. Now I don't have to go to school anymore. Now I can work full time, as you mentioned. But my mentality wasn't even know so much about college. Even though I was a good student, wasn't the greatest student. I was a good student. I didn't have college. It wasn't in my mindset at the time. But I only worked for a short time outside of high school and said, you know what? I don't want to work fast food for the rest of my life. And so I ended up joining the military with the idea that I would get the GI Bill and go forward. And what I would study, didn't have that planned out yet. Wasn't sure, but I would go from there.
I was working at Blockbuster Video through the end of my high school career, and then decided I would just start going full time for a while and save up some money. I ended up basically going through this time period just eating more fast food. I wasn't as physically active as I had once been, walking back and forth all across campus all day, and the limited availability of sweets and fast food and things like that. And so I found myself putting on weight a lot faster than I expected.
Yeah.
And it made the whole transition process into life out of this formal schooling into just the world that much more jarring and difficult. So that's another thing that I would say is some advice that I have for everyone who's starting that is pay attention. Pay attention to what you're eating, to how your routine is changing, and make a plan for how you're going to handle that. If you're usually physically active, but your new routine doesn't give you the same just built-in opportunities, you're going to have to find a way, whether that's a gym membership or planning to go take walks at the park, or maybe even go back to the high school and use the track for a while to run some laps if that's your thing.
Hopefully you're still hanging out with a couple of your friends from high school, and one of them's that really brutally honest friend that you might have is hey, I've noticed that you're kind of, twice the Casey that you used to be. Something of that nature, right? It all depends.
Oh, no, I noticed it myself. Yeah, I didn't need someone to point it out to me. I had it. I figured it out.
I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had those kind of friends that we would joke in that manner. For me, because I didn't work at the fast food industry very long. So when I got out of high school, I had just got done working at Little Caesars, and I switched over to McDonald's, and I was at McDonald's only for a couple of months while I was waiting to go into the military. And so I didn't have the opportunity to actually put on weight then, because I went right into the military, and in military,
they're gonna work you.
If you gain weight in the military while you're in boot camp, there's something medically wrong with you, right?
Right.
My military career didn't go as planned. I ended up getting injured during boot camp, but it wasn't actually diagnosed till several months after that. I went through, got done with boot camp, went back over to Camp Pendleton, and then started working on my training things, Marine combat training, stuff like that. It was during that first week of Marine combat training, we did our first hike, and my knee was killing me. again, it was something that happened to me during boot camp. But long story short, my military career was cut short. And so I was in for just slightly under a year before I was let go. And now what? Now what I'm going to do? Because this was my new beginning. This is where I was going to do something with this, right? I didn't know how it was going to be. Thought maybe I might retire from the military. Who knows?
Yeah.
So when I got out, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess start
You're out into ghost world.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start looking for a job, I guess, because I just can't sit around and not do nothing. It's just not me. Fortunately enough, my oldest brother, he had recently got married, and his father-in-law was a store manager at a local grocery store, and he hired me on as a courtesy clerk, and that was the beginning of my retail career. And that led down a certain path, right? But even then, that came to an end at some point in time.
Yeah, you find a time when you have to look around and say, is this situation working for me? Is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to be doing? And we have these kind of milestones in things like school where it's based on an academic year.
Right.
The year comes to an end. You've completed the program, the certificate, the degree, whatever it is, and then it's over. And that's how it's kind of intended to be. But then you have to sometimes stop and look around at the world that you're in and you say, is this company that I'm working for, does it align with my values? Is it allowing me to live the life that I want with my family? As a parent, am I able to spend time with my children during their formative years? These kind of things all sort of add up. And if you're not paying attention, well, to quote Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. And you got to stop and look around every once in a while or you could miss it.
And so life is full of the stops and then starts. And some of those stops can be heart-wrenching or troubling or disconcerting. We got to be willing to know that that's how life works and know that the new beginning is coming and figure out what we need to do to prepare for that. So on that note, as we've talked about before, Casey and I have worked together for a good while now, but I just recently took on a new job and a new title at a different company, and so I'll be moving on. So it's the ending of this particular segment of my work history, but it's not the ending of my relationship with Casey. But there are some things that are different and actually weird to get used to. So at first, I was very indifferent about moving companies to the new place and leaving the old place, indifferent to leaving, only for the fact that I had made some analysis on my own based off where I felt I was, where my future laid with the company, and was it in line with what I was wanting to do. And we talk about on the show all the time about making these kind of analysis and then aligning it with our goals, and does it align with our goals? And if not, make these little micro changes or sometimes macro changes in order to get us aligned to where we want to go. So at first, I'm like, nope, this is exactly want to be. But this past week was the first week that I've been away from the previous company, and man, I felt weird.
Yeah, for you and me both. Going into work without my buddy has been very odd.
And I found that being the extrovert that I am, I found that, man, was I missing that input that I was getting on a regular basis. And it really hit me on Friday. I'm like, I got to get out. 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 I did not feel right. And I hadn't really talked to Casey at all, except for text messages.
Yeah, the odd bit here and there.
I was looking forward greatly to this particular recording because I knew I was going to spend the majority of the day here, first with the D&D game, and then doing this particular episode. Knowing that this is the new beginning for this new work experience also is a new beginning of how do I make sure that I get the time in that I require to be able to spend with my good friend. So it is still going to be doing some traveling. It's still going to be making sure that we do the D&D games on a regular, and if we can, time willing, God willing, that we get to spend time and going and doing other things, going out to lunch, going out to dinner, or go watch a movie together or something of that nature.
Goofing off.
There's a little bit of time involved. We live about 2 hours away from each other, but I don't mind making the travel because some things are worth it.
All right, so another pop culture reference. The old song, I don't remember oh, come on, brains. I believe it's by Semisonic. Has that line in it where it says, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.
I'm familiar.
So recognizing that things in our life are going to come and go, and a lot of things are going to be transient. Sort of along the lines of what you mentioned, the stoic wisdom of, is this something I can bear? Is this something that I can endure? And is this something that's within my power to change? So if it's making me uncomfortable and giving me stress, okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to change. But
Right.
if I need it to change, then do I bear it? Do I endure it? Or do I do something about it and take action and make something change? There's another quote that I heard, trying to remember where I heard it from, but the gist of it is, always try to run toward something
And not away
rather
from
than
something.
away from something as much as you can. Because there's going to be hard times in life. There's going to be things that are difficult in relationships, in work, in school, in every aspect of life. There's difficulty. That's one of the hallmarks of life.
Right.
But if we're always running away from things that are difficult, we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to grow.
Right.
So part of this is that aspect of, how much can I grow? How much can I change because of this in a positive way to be able to face and accomplish more?
Right.
And how much am I going to run toward the next opportunity, the next challenge?
There has to be that recognition that you make when you're making these kind of decisions and these changes. Do the analysis. Am I actually moving towards something? Or is it just me having a knee-jerk reaction to a thing? And like, nope, I'm not going to deal with it. Nope.
Especially discomfort.
And that's easy to do. And it's almost instinctual, really.
Yep.
If something causes you pain or angst or you're frightful about a thing, then our knee-jerk reaction, our instinctual reaction is going to be like, nope, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yep. It's a reflex to avoid pain.
For me, I was like, nope, is as frustrating as it was at the time when I decided, like, yeah, this just isn't jiving with where I'm wanting to go and what I'm wanting to do with myself. I'm not going to have the knee-jerk reaction, I'm out of here, and just walk out the door. I was like, no, I got to plan this out and make the analysis of, am I running away from this? Or is it really like, this doesn't fall within my plan. Does not fall within what I want to do with myself. And how much can I bear before I can change it?
Yeah. Speaking of weird anecdote, right? I was working on this major conversion project of like the whole HR payroll system.
Okay.
It was very stressful. We were basically working in this one conference room, like 20 hours a day plus. Yeah, it was awful. Around Christmas time, no less. This was so horrible. Anyway, it was a combined team of some technical people, which I was on that crew, actually doing like the programming to make this possible. And then there was another group of people that were HR payroll specialists. So they had more of the working knowledge of how the system is going to function, how the old one did, how the new one needs to work. There was one young woman who one day the stress just got to her. She stood up and she says, "That's it. I'm done." And she picked up her things and she left.
No.
And everyone kind of just stared around like, did she just quit?
Yeah.
And everybody else stayed and worked for like another 5 hours after that, like into the night, because that was just finishing the project was where we were all kind of focused.
Right.
She didn't come in the weekend. Like we were all working weekends too, because there's a very hard deadline to get this done before the year was over so that the new year payroll could start. And she didn't come in on the weekend. And it was just kind of assumed that when she said, "All right, I'm done," and walked out, that she quit. And they processed her termination based on quitting and then not showing up for the weekend, project. She showed up on Monday morning.
Oh my gosh, I was just going to ask.
She showed up Monday morning and they said, "You walked out."
Yeah, abandonment of job, yeah.
You said, and I quote, "I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore." And you left.
Yeah.
And you didn't come back. And we called you and you didn't answer.
Yeah.
So when we're in stressful situations, when things are too much, it can be really, really hard. But one very important thing to do is communicate.
Yeah.
that when we have needs that are not being met, or the situation gets too hard or too stressful, rather than dropping a bomb and exploding the whole situation, communicate, talk about it, try to figure it out, try to work it out. Now, not every situation is going to be amenable to just, a change in circumstance, but
Right.
if you say, look, I need to take a day because I'm really stressed out. Okay, if you communicate that, oftentimes there's something that can be done.
And so in this particular case for me, when a couple months ago, when the first incident happened and I realized that something needs to change, I took the time to speak to my direct supervisor. And besides some of the other things that were said during that meeting, one of the things was like, look, if the realization is if you can't be happy here, then you need to do what you need to do in order to become happy, and maybe moving on is one of them. And that was struck a chord for me. And it didn't make me feel mad. I wasn't upset. It was like, look, nothing is forever.
Oh, he's right.
Right.
That's the hard thing, is that most bosses won't say something like that because they think it's their job to just keep you there.
Right.
And doing the minimum, like doing that status quo, meeting the bare minimum.
So after that, I was like, okay. So I did what I needed to do to figure out what I can do to change my situation. The opportunity came up to work at the company I'm going to be moving to. And upon exit of the current company, I had a discussion with my manager. And I don't think he was in shock per se, but I think he was still a little bit taken aback that it was kind of like out of the blue kind of a thing. And I said, I hope that I never gave you the impression that I was like a delinquent, or I used a more derogatory term to describe myself. It's a military term. Anyway, it's basically somebody who isn't very helpful. We'll just say that.
Okay.
I said, hopefully I didn't come off as that the past couple of months. He's like, no, I thought you were just doing what you normally did, doing everything that was expected of me. It's like, good, because that's what I wanted you to take in, that even if I wasn't happy, I was going to make sure that this ending was appropriate and ended the way it should be. Amicable, friendly, and everybody was kind of understanding, like, look, I still have a job to do. I still have to do it. And I'm going to do that job because that's what I'm getting paid for. But I do need to move on because this is ended for me as far as taking me in the trajectory that I want to head into. And he understood. And he was kind of taken aback about the not having an emotion to it. I said, well, no. I had an emotional response.
I've been processing this for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, months, really.
Yeah.
But I was like, I had an emotional response, but I'm not going to act upon that emotional response. I'm going to wait till I'm done being upset, and then I'm going to reflect on it and say, okay, is this something that I can bear? If it is, then I'll continue to do so. But if it's just something that seems to me like this just isn't really working,
you tell him, hey, you should watch the WizNugs episode on Stoicism, and that'll explain why you didn't see a big emotional outburst from me.
So I did bring it up, and he didn't actually know what Stoicism was, so I took the time to explain it to him as much of a nutshell that I could.
Yep.
And then he kind of got it, like, oh, okay. I said, so that's been my mentality, is like, I'm going to do my best not to have an emotional outburst. It doesn't mean I didn't have one. Emotional response, but I'm not going to act upon that. I'm going to go and pull back and weigh my options. And his response was like, man, I wish I could do that. But the realization is that after I had told him that I was going to have to end my employment there was nothing they could offer. And that was another realization that this was the right choice for me.
Yeah.
It's like there was no, well, what can we do to keep you here? There was none of that. It was like, well, I understand. We wish you the best. And so I'm like, okay. And there was no negative responses or back and forth at all. It was very friendly, very open, and supportive, if anything else. So I was happy with that.
I think that brings up another interesting topic about endings and beginnings, especially on the internet today. There's a lot of sort of idolizing of the people who just like burn all the bridges, burn it to the ground as they're walking out the door because all of the emotion is so high. And I hate this place, and you guys are a bunch of losers, and I just got... And it's not really a good way to live.
Right.
That we can process our negative emotions and we can just let them be. That forgiveness of somebody else's shortcomings isn't like a gift that you're giving somebody that you don't like or somebody that hurt you. Forgiveness is for yourself to let that go so that you can move on without the weight of that dragging you down.
And why would you want to carry that going forward anyway? I've always been a big proponent of letting things go as best as you can. There's going to be some things that happen in your life that are going to be super traumatic, and you're going to carry that and you're going to think about that for a long time. And it's just human nature to do so. But if it's within your power, and if you have that mindset to be able to say, okay, I'm going to remember this, but I don't need it to be the deciding factor in my life going forward. I want to be able to make decisions that are going to be best for me. And so in some aspects, it still has an effect, but it's the effect of I don't want it to be a burden on the way that I move forward. So I'm going to choose to not let it be a burden. I would correlate this to some of our upbringings with my siblings. Some people have taken the fact that we haven't had a father figure in our life as a huge detriment and have had it affect their choices going forward and the things they decided to do in the past they decided to take. And for me, I was like, if I can't have the father figure that I would love to have in my life, then I will be that father figure. Again, be the pillar, be the example.
Figure out what you need and then do it. Okay, another pop culture reference that comes to mind here. This is the Sandra Bullock classic, 28 Days. Not to be confused with the zombie outbreak horror 28 Days Later.
I was hoping you were going to bring up Love Potion #9 because that is a Sandra Bullock classic to me.
So in this one, the great Sandy Bullock,
Sandy,
if I can call you that, she plays an alcoholic addict, drug addict, and she has a sister who is 100% straight-laced, absolutely won't touch a drop of alcohol or like barely even will take an aspirin for a headache kind of person.
Okay.
They grew up with an alcoholic single mom, and they both credit or blame her for the way that they are. That I am the way I am because my mom was the way she was.
Yep.
And they're completely different directions that they took. So ultimately, blaming our surroundings for how we act isn't. Yes, there's different inputs that we receive, but ultimately we have to take that personal responsibility for where we're going to go after the ending of something, how we're going to move on to that next beginning.
Right. I think that the term, it's not what happened to you that defines you, it's how you decide to react to it or respond to it.
And there are some people that just don't like planning things in advance because they're more spontaneous, and that's another way of being too.
For some people, some environments, some situations are very overwhelming, and it overloads them, and therefore the decisions that they make may not be the best intended.
So to wrap up, we'd like to say congratulations to those who are graduating, those of you finishing up a school year. Good job on the hard work you've put in. Celebrate that. Also, plan for your next beginning. Plan for that next thing in your life so that you can hit the ground running and keep moving.
So for those of you that may have just started a new job, a new career, a new relationship, any new beginning in your life, embrace it, plan accordingly, and know that there's going to be some strife and struggles along the way, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. And be cognizant of the time that things do need to change, whatever it may be. Hopefully it's very limited and you don't have to do it very often, but we've talked about this before. Life means change, and embrace the change as best as you can.
Check in with yourself every now and then. Figure out what it is that you need for your life to be happy, and then pursue it.
So we want to thank you again for joining us here on WizNugs, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today on WizNugs. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. For more information, head over to mywiznugs.com.
I'm not familiar with the lyric, but I'm familiar with the song.
Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.